Hi, my name's Integrity Reeves, and I'm so excited and honored to be here with the Alternative Venues for Jazz audience. I'm very thankful to Miss Gail Boyd, who has invited me to be a part of this wonderful experience. And I'm just here to introduce myself and to get to know all of you. And I'm excited to hear from the audience and just see where this could lead. I'm a jazz vocalist from Washington, D.C. area. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Maryland. And I first discovered jazz when I was a student at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Um, and I hadn't really had very much exposure to jazz um, prior to high school. So I was kind of a late bloomer, but once I caught the bug, I just sort of ate, slept, and breathed jazz. So it seems like it's a good fit for for the audience here today. My mom is incredible, and I have to always give her and my grandma a shout out because without them, I don't know where I would be. Um, and she would take me to school in the mornings in high school, and because she had to get my grandmother to work and also get herself to work, I was often at school like 7 o'clock. And thankfully, we had these very large lockers that were specifically designed to hold instruments. And also, students would sort of sit in there and sleep until their first class began. And that's what I would do was kind of sit in the locker until class started. And I have a vivid memory, and I always come back to this memory of how jazz first entered my consciousness and my heart. I was sitting there and heard this, wafting sound come down the hall, and I didn't know what it was. And I was like, what is that amazing sound that I'd never heard before? It was like no other music I'd heard. Because I was primarily a classical musician. I play the violin also, and that's what I was in school for at Duke Ellington. I was a violin major in the instrumental music department. But this sound was not classical. I couldn't figure out what it was, and it sounded like. I was like, what is this? So I followed the sound on this morning and went down to what I realized was the jazz band room and encountered a wonderful person and professor and now mentor, Mr. Davy Yarborough, who was conducting Caravan at the time. And after I just sort of stood at the door, listening to this sound and wondering, what this was. And so after all the kids shuffled out of their rehearsal, I went in. I was like, what is that that you guys are playing? And he very kindly said, well, that's Caravan by Duke Ellington, and asked me what I played, and I told him violin, and he sort of, thought to himself like, well, that's not a typical jazz band instrument, but would you like to play in the jazz band? And I was like, me? Like, I could barely read. Like, it was at the time, I just could not even picture myself being a part of something like that. I was a freshman, and he said, well, why don't you come in and sit in the classes and listen? And then, if you're interested and, you know, ready next year, you can join. And that's what I did. I um, listened to the early morning jazz rehearsals. They started at 7:30, so I was always there on time. And the next year I joined the jazz band and never looked back. I have loved jazz ever since, and um, really just did a deep dive into everything that had jazz as a part of it. And that's sort of my origin story when it comes to jazz. And um, I remember the first recording that I ever bought for myself, which was the Getz Gilberto album. I bought that when I was in middle school because a camp counselor was playing, and I just wanted to know what that was and didn't know what they were saying, but loved the sound. And I didn't put two and two together that that was a type of jazz that was, it was all part of the journey. And fast forward to, 10 years later, I sing in Brazilian, Portuguese, and love the bossa nova and samba style that I discovered from that album. So that was sort of my first album that I spent my own money to buy on CD. I have younger uh, friends, and they're like, CDs, what's what's that? So I can understand how, I guess, my parents would look at me like, when I said albums, what's that? So I hope I'm not rambling. I'm just so excited to be here and talking about music and jazz that I love so very much. Um, that album, the Gets Gilberto album, was really sort of seminal for me, and led me to a lot of other um, albums that every jazz musician should have. Of course, Kind of Blue, and the next album that I bought for myself was actually a jazz singers compilation that I found at Starbucks, and um, and purchased it, and discovered these incredible voices, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, Carmen McRae, and from there I was just hooked, and of course Mr. Yarborough gave me things to listen to, gave me assignments to listen to, because he knew that I didn't have a background in jazz and had never really listened to this music before. And so I ate up every assignment that he ever gave me. I did transcriptions, um, and I continue to do that. And so I think that's one of the things, when you love a music, you become an eternal student of that music. And I can honestly say that I am continually a student of this music, always trying to find um, the best way to serve and honor it. Whatever we call it, I want to do it justice. Um, so I bought every album I could and listened to as many albums as I could. And, Mr. Yarborough was nice enough to let me borrow some albums. I was in high school and didn't have any money to purchase a lot of things, but listening to those albums really propelled me to do what I'm doing now, and I didn't even really realize it at the time. So after Duke Ellington, I went to uh, Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University, um, as a jazz voice major, which is definitely a shift from what I was doing at Ellington primarily, which was classical violin. And I still continue to play and also teach, but I just knew that this was calling I needed to follow that. So I went to Peabody and learned so many great lessons. My teacher was Jay Clayton, who is a pioneer in the free jazz world, and so that was a new uncharted territory for me. I had just discovered straight ahead, and then all of a sudden, as a freshman in college, I'm being thrown into this whole other landscape of sound. And so all of those experiences really influenced me. And she also was somebody who encouraged me to begin writing, which was hugely important to me. And I didn't know it. I didn't know I had the capacity to write. I always loved writing stories or poems, but I never put two and two together with music and writing until college. So I began writing and discovered a love for composition, which I guess I'll touch on later, how that began to manifest. But Peabody was definitely an eye-opening experience, being in the conservatory environment and playing Black American music was definitely um, an experience that helped me to look inside myself as to where I fit in this music and what it means to me and what it meant to me. So after Peabody, I decided I wanted to have a different type of experience, and wanted to study with a particular professor, and came to Howard University to do my graduate studies. And I was a jazz studies major. So, looking back on it now, it's kind of like, this all started from sitting in a locker at 7 a.m., listening to these amazing sounds. And, it brought me all the way to grad school. Um, and from there, I was able to learn so much about myself and about this music, and continue to do a deep dive into to great works of jazz. And a few of the albums that stand out to me that I sort of really dug into during my grad school time was Our Man in Paris by Dexter Gordon. I made a challenge to myself that I was going to transcribe every solo that Dexter Gordon took on the album, and write words to it. That was also um, my first exposure to writing my own um, lyrics to words, and writing contrafacts and all of these things. And so that album is really special to me. Every time I hear it, I think about my time at Howard. I think about um, you know writing lyrics to these amazing melodies that I discovered. Um, a couple other albums that I feel like are worth mentioning as a part of my influence in my journey was Happenings, the Bobby Hutcherson album, and Speak Like a Child, Herbie Hancock, um, Night Dreamer, Wayne Shorter. And so I really love instrumental jazz, and I think it's been a positive influence on me vocally, so that I have more language and more understanding than I would have if I were just listening to one type of music. I love all jazz, no matter what it is or what we call it, or um, so those are some of the albums that mean a lot to me, that continue to amaze me when I listen to them. Like, how is this possible? Um, so another opportunity that came about from being at Howard University was that I was able to sing in an a cappella group, a jazz. Really, it was a jazz ensemble, jazz vocal ensemble, because we weren't singing typical a cappella music or a cappella arrangements. We were singing, very intricate and complex harmonies as a part of the group Afro Blue, which I was honored to be a part of during my time at Howard. And that led the group to be invited to be a part of the Sing Off, which was a nationally broadcast television show on NBC. And we competed over the course of 3 months. That we had to go out to LA and live there in a hotel, and it was just a wonderful experience. At the time, it was very difficult, um, but I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a great experience, and we learned so many lessons and did pretty well in the competition. So, that was something that I was really fortunate to have that experience. Um, Another great thing that Howard brought out for me was I met my now husband. At the time, he was just a friend, but now um, uh, I recently got married in September, and I met him at Howard also. So these are, I feel like I'm just trying to paint a picture of who I am in jazz, and how I got to this point. Um, some of the things that are coming up for me, I'm currently working on a project of original, so that brings in what I learned at Peabody and what I continue to learn at Howard, which was composition. And um, my love of composition actually allowed me to be a part of the Kennedy Center Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program for young composers in jazz. And that was an amazing experience as well. I got to work with some of today's most prolific minds in jazz: Mark Carey, Jason Moran, Torres Mateen. Um, and it was just Craig Handy was another one of the professors there. Pevin, wonderful people who not only play this music but add to it, and that I feel like is the next step for me. I've recorded an EP of standards and arranged pop material that's like through a jazz lens, and also some Brazilian music that I played violin on as well. And I love that album. It's called Stairway to the Stars, in case anyone um, would like to listen to that. Um, it's a very dear to my heart because it was my first thing, totally self-produced, self-funded, self everything. And so this next project, I'm hoping, will be the next step in my evolution as a Stairway to the Stars is available on all platforms. Yes, it is. um, so this next project, I'm hoping, is the next step in my evolution as a musician and a composer. So I'll be contributing to the cipher of jazz, and that's very important to me. I think um, all musicians who are a part of this legacy and a part of this tradition go through stages: imitation, execution, creation, and then, you know, evolution. And I'm hoping to just take that next step into the creation portion of my journey. And it's an exciting one. Most of the material that I'm writing about is about my experience. And I think that's one of the things that I love most about this music, is that the people are telling stories. We're not only performers, but we're also historians and theorists and composers and griots. This is an oral tradition, of course, and so we're always passing down this information to the next generation of people, not through, you know, always uh, lecture style, but it's through the stories and the history that we share. And so I'm excited to move into the direction of sharing my experience with others in the jazz sense. So that's what's coming up for me currently. Um, and one of the topics was, you know, how did I get through the pandemic? And you know, it was difficult, very difficult, as it is for every person. That's one of the things that I actually take as a positive, a silver lining, and that is that the experience of the pandemic brought us as a nation, as a world, to a place of, you know, collective um, energy, and reminded us that we are in this together, and that we really need to help each other and uplift each other, because we're united in this shared experience. Um, and for me, that's very germane to my philosophy as a person, and also a musician. Um, so so I'm thankful for that one aspect of this very difficult time. Um, how I got through was a lot of prayer, and um, I taught a lot, and I still continue to teach. I have my own music studio of about 35 students, and I'm blessed to have each one of them. They are a part of my heart and my life that is irreplaceable to me, and I get a little emotional thinking about them, because in all my educational experiences, I struggled. You know, I was not a great student. I never proclaimed to be, but you know, I did my best in those situations. But I think now that I'm given this opportunity to steward young lives and to be there for students, I want to be the teacher that I needed. I want to be the guide that shows that there's more than one way to learn, because that was something that was always a struggle for me, is learning differently than some of the other kids. And I never was able to sort of take the easy planned route. And so as an educator, that's something that is very important to me, is to always cater um, to every student, how they learn. And I think that's a gift, one of the gifts that I sort of tapped into during the pandemic out of necessity, but I think it was spirit, source, universe guiding me to another aspect of what I'm doing. Um, and so that's very important to me. Teaching was really what I poured life's blood into during the pandemic. And I'm thankful now, opportunities are beginning to open up, and things are starting to move in a direction where we can get together in person, and we're able to share our music in a different way. And I hope that that continues to happen. My dream is to perform in Brazil, and perform at the Lincoln Jazz Center in New York, and to continue to share my music all over the world. And I also hope that education and teaching is always a part of what I do. There's sort of this stigma about teaching. It's like, oh, well, those who can do and those who can't teach. That's sort of like the negative stigma that comes along with being a musician, being an artist, and also teaching. But I don't view it that way. I know that I'm a great musician, and I've worked really hard and continue to work hard and study hard. And it's a gift to be able to share what you have learned along the way with somebody else. And it is a gift when you're able to transmit that in a loving um, way, where somebody can receive it and take it and pass it on. And that, I think, is definitely a part of my legacy. At least I hope that it will be. um, I wish I could see everybody, have some questions from people, or just get to know you. But I'm so very honored to be here, and to share um, who I am, or at least a little part of who I am, with everyone. I think if I could share anything with an artist who's just beginning, or a young person, I would give them the advice to just don't give up. It's difficult. This life as an artist is not easy, but it's full of little gems along the way that you know can change somebody else's life, and can really inspire, and in a way that you might not have even expected, or that you don't even realize until much much later on. When I think about my experience and all the great teachers that I've had and all the great mentors, I don't think that they even thought that they were planting a seed that would lead to a career for somebody. But it did. I think about Mr. Yarborough a lot, and he instilled some things in me that I don't think that he realized that he was, and I certainly didn't. I just wanted to experience this wonderful music, and here I am 10 years later, pursuing it, and hopefully sharing that with with other people. um, so I think that's all I've got. I feel like I'm just going on and on, but um, I am very excited to be here. I'm very thankful for everyone who's taken the time um, to be here with me today, and who may be interested in my music. You can find it um, on Amazon Music, Apple Music, anywhere where streaming is available. Um, and I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that I get to meet some of this wonderful audience with um, uh, in the future, live and in person. I'm a hugger. I'm going to warn you, so I hope that I get to meet you all, and to give you a big hug.